The anankastic personality is a world of inner compulsion, a constant ordering of chaos that may not even exist. It is the need for control, born from a fear of mistakes, incompleteness, and weakness. People with this personality type live within a structure. They build themselves from the smallest details, rules, rituals, and perfectly planned days. Their inner world is a mosaic of duties, standards, obligations, and constant vigilance. They value order not only outwardly, but also in relationships, emotions, and decisions. Every deviation, every uncertainty creates tension, as if the entire system might collapse. The anankastic personality is not loud. It does not scream or openly dominate. It acts calmly, consistently, and with tremendous effort to maintain a seemingly balanced state. It is often mistaken for diligence, precision, and conscientiousness, but behind it lies immense internal tension and harsh self-evaluation. Perfection is not a choice, but a necessity. Rest is a luxury they can scarcely afford, and imperfection feels like personal failure. This is a personality that strives out of fear of disorder. It wants to be good, but by unrealistic, merciless standards. It wants to be needed, but finds it hard to tolerate the weakness of others because it cannot accept its own. At its core is a constant effort not to fail, not to lose control, and to make the world at least a little more predictable. A relationship with an anankastic person is like living beside a precisely timed mechanism. Every element must be in its place. Every conversation conducted according to a rule. Every gesture kept within the boundaries of what is considered right. At first glance, daily life in such a relationship may seem stable, orderly, and predictable. But beneath the surface of this structure pulses tension, the constant fear of mistakes, uncertainty, and loss of control. The partner of an anankastic person often feels judged, not out of malice, but by the relentless standard of perfection. Spontaneous decisions may be halted by rational arguments. Relaxation, fun, or emotional outbursts are often sources of discomfort. The anankastic person cannot relax in imperfection, let alone allow their partner to do so. The relationship becomes a place of high expectations, constant criticism, corrections, and reminders. For sensitive individuals, this can feel oppressive and exhausting, leading to guilt or the sense of never being enough. On the other hand, the anankastic person can be extremely loyal, responsible, and committed. They do not flee from obligations and do not neglect their loved ones. They are constantly trying to be in order, often more in line with rules than with emotions. In times of crisis, they can be a rock, so long as they are not forced to improvise. They express feelings through actions, care, and responsibility, but rarely through emotional openness. Closeness is often limited by the fear of losing control, and love frequently takes the form of care rather than tenderness. A relationship with an anankastic person is a constant balancing act between security and tension, between order and emotional distance. It is a partnership with someone who tries to love as best they can, by rules that don't always allow for true togetherness. The diagnosis of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, also known as anankastic personality disorder, is based on the presence of stable patterns of rigidity, perfectionism, and excessive control that significantly affect a person's functioning in relationships, work, and everyday life. These traits are neither temporary nor situation-dependent. They form the core structure of psychological functioning, are present since early adulthood, and are often not recognized by the affected individual, who perceives them as normal. The clinical picture is dominated by excessive preoccupation with order, details, rules, lists, and schedules. The person often loses sight of the purpose and meaning of their actions, focusing obsessively on form. Perfectionism here is not a motivating force, but a blockade. Tasks are postponed or never completed because they fail to meet unrealistic standards. Another key aspect is the difficulty in delegating tasks. The anankastic person rarely trusts others to perform something with equal precision. Thus, they excessively control, correct, and intervene. Moral rigidity and exaggerated conscientiousness lead to treating even minor inaccuracies as serious transgressions. Strict control over money and resources, often with a tendency towards stinginess, does not stem from greed, but from a deeply rooted need to guard against unpredictability. Emotionally, individuals with this disorder are reserved, reluctant to act spontaneously, and distrustful of emotions that escape their rules. They struggle to accept their own mistakes, and even more so the imperfections of others. In conversation, they can be strict, tend to correct others, and insist on being right, even about trivial matters. The diagnosis of anankastic personality requires ruling out obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, which is characterized by intrusive thoughts and compulsions, whereas in OCPD, rigid attitudes, beliefs, and character traits are more dominant than typical compulsive symptoms. The diagnostic process considers the overall pattern of functioning, life history, defense mechanisms, and the impact on daily relationships. This is not a temporary tendency toward order, but a deeply ingrained personality structure whose rigidity can lead to suffering, isolation, and emotional difficulties. In everyday life, the anankastic personality can manifest in many subtle yet distressing ways. In one person, the symptoms began with meticulous control over their daily schedule, every hour of the day planned in detail, every minute accounted for. When the plan was even slightly disrupted, it led to intense tension, irritability, and even social withdrawal. Spontaneous meetings were not declined out of disinterest, but due to a lack of preparation and the unpredictability that caused significant discomfort. Another person avoided vacations for years, citing frugality and obligations, but in reality, they feared losing control over their daily routine. When the family tried to persuade them to go on a short trip, they reacted irritably, criticized the impracticality of the idea, and looked for reasons to stay home. At work, they were appreciated for their accuracy, but were known to have difficulties collaborating, correcting others' tasks, unable to tolerate even the smallest mistakes, and frequently working overtime to ensure everything was just right. In another case, the mother of an adolescent controlled nearly every aspect of their child's life, from the daily routine to the method of hand washing. She claimed she wanted to raise the child well, but behind her behavior lay deep distrust of spontaneity and a need to impose order as a protective mechanism. Over time, the child began to hide emotions and eventually entire areas of life to avoid constant criticism and remarks. In a further example, a young medical student fell into an emotional crisis after failing an exam, not because she lacked knowledge, but because she felt insufficiently prepared and gave up at the last minute. Her perfectionism was so paralyzing that any imperfection was viewed as a moral failure. Despite high performance and recognition from instructors, she suffered from chronic feelings of guilt and shame. These examples show that the anankastic personality does not have to be dramatic. It often appears in everyday decisions, small rituals, and the way one interacts with themselves and others. It is quiet, but persistent. It carries the immense burden of having to be in order, always, everywhere, and at any cost. Therapy for individuals with anankastic personality requires sensitivity and patience, as the foundation of this disorder is a strong need for control and difficulty accepting change. Therapeutic work focuses on creating a safe space where the patient can gradually detach from rigid patterns of thinking and behavior. Cognitive behavioral therapy is often the method of choice to identify and modify deeply rooted beliefs about perfection, duty, and self-criticism. Over the course of therapy, the patient learns flexibility, acceptance of imperfection, and how to cope with the fear of losing control. The therapeutic relationship plays a key role. Trust and stability enable a gradual reduction of the tension associated with the need for order. The therapist does not dictate change, but accompanies the patient in discovering alternative ways of dealing with fear and stress. Work often focuses on emotions that have been suppressed or ignored in favor of control and rationalization. Pharmacotherapy is not the primary treatment for anankastic personality, but can be helpful for accompanying conditions such as depression or anxiety. Medication supports symptom reduction and allows for more effective therapeutic progress. Support from the person's environment is equally important. Understanding the specifics of this disorder helps prevent conflicts and frustrations that arise from differing needs and ways of functioning. Relatives learn to set boundaries, remain patient, and offer support without giving in to the pressure of perfectionism. The goal of therapy is not primarily to change the personality, but to develop the ability to function flexibly, to foster self-acceptance and acceptance of others, and to build fulfilling relationships. It is a process that requires time, commitment, and support, but it can lead to a significant improvement in quality of life and a reduction in internal tension. What is an anankastic personality, and how does it differ from obsessive-compulsive disorder? The anankastic personality is a persistent behavioral pattern characterized by perfectionism, a need for control, and rigidity. It does not include the typical compulsions and ritualistic behaviors that define obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. OCPD is more a way of being and thinking, whereas OCD involves the presence of intrusive thoughts and rituals. How can you tell if someone has an anankastic personality? Typical features include excessive attention to details, rules and order, difficulty delegating tasks, perfectionistic behavior that blocks action, and emotional restraint. Such individuals are often overly conscientious and critical of themselves and others. Does an anankastic personality always cause problems in relationships? Not always, but often. Rigidity, high expectations, and difficulty expressing emotions can cause tension in partnerships and families. However, people with this personality type are frequently very loyal and responsible, which can provide a stable basis for relationships. Can an anankastic personality be treated? It is not about a cure in the classical sense, but therapy aimed at increasing flexibility, acceptance of imperfection, and better stress management. Cognitive behavioral therapy and psychological support can significantly improve quality of life. How can you help a person with an anankastic personality? By showing patience, understanding, and not yielding to the pressure of perfectionism. It is also important to set healthy boundaries and encourage emotional expression and acceptance of imperfection. Are people with an anankastic personality aware of their difficulties? Often not. The behavioral patterns are experienced as natural and necessary. Criticism is frequently perceived as a threat, which hinders reflection and change. Is perfectionism always negative? Moderate perfectionism can motivate and promote goal achievement, but when it becomes compulsive and blocks action or relationships, it leads to suffering. What are the most common difficulties for people with an anankastic personality in professional life? Problems delegating tasks, excessive control, decision delays, difficulties adapting, and a tendency to focus excessively on details. Can an anankastic personality co-occur with other disorders? Yes, often in combination with anxiety, depression, and sometimes other personality disorders. In such cases, therapy must consider the overall pattern of functioning. The anankastic personality is a deeply ingrained pattern of thinking and behavior in which perfectionism, a need for control, and rigidity outweigh flexibility and spontaneity. Relationships with individuals of this personality type are often difficult, marked by tensions arising from high expectations, criticism, and limited emotional expression, but at the same time characterized by loyalty and responsibility. The diagnosis is based on the observation of enduring traits and beliefs that affect daily functioning, while therapy aims to soften rigid patterns, promote acceptance of imperfection, and build satisfying relationships. Psychological support, as well as support from close others, play a central role in the process of change and improvement of quality of life. Despite the challenges, people with anankastic personality can learn to live more flexibly and calmly, and find a balance between order and a life full of authentic experiences.